Husband and his entire family humiliate his wife at the Christmas party, unaware of who she really is. What she does next ruins them. He thought the night ended when she walked out. He was wrong. At the Christmas party, surrounded by his family, their laughter, their raised glasses, Daniel watched it happen. He heard the jokes. He heard his mother mock her luck. He heard his sister laugh at her gift before opening it. And when someone reduced his wife to a placeholder, he stayed silent. That silence was his cruelty. He didn't stop them. He didn't defend her. He smiled, embarrassed but compliant, while his family turned her into entertainment. And when Emily calmly set her untouched glass down and said she needed to leave, Daniel believed he'd won. He believed she would cool off, forgive, return the way she always did. What he didn't know was that the moment she stepped into the cold night, he didn't just lose her. He handed her a reason. While he stayed behind pretending nothing mattered, she was opening a door he had never been allowed to see because he had never earned the right. A file he didn't know existed, a trust he never asked about, a structure with her name already written into it. Not long after, Daniel would walk into a courtroom, still believing he could explain it all away, still believing his voice carried weight, until he saw where she was seated, until he heard the evidence read aloud, until he realized the quiet wife they mocked had never been powerless, only patient. And when the consequences hit, they didn't hit one person, they hit the whole family. Dear viewers, thank you for being here. If you watch without subscribing, it's like standing in that room, hearing the jokes land, watching her walk out, and still saying nothing. But when you click subscribe, you're choosing to be the voice she didn't get that night. You're standing with every woman who was underestimated, every quiet heart that survived in silence, and every person who finally chose themselves. Please subscribe and tell me where you're watching from in the comments. The sound of the phone vibrating on the kitchen counter cut through the quiet like a warning. Emily Carter didn't pick it up. She stood still, hands resting on the edge of the counter, eyes fixed on the dark screen as it buzzed once, twice, then stopped. The caller ID was short, neutral, almost cold. Brooks' legal private client. Emily exhaled slowly, as if steadying herself against a memory she wasn't ready to open yet. Then she turned away, pretending the call had never happened. Emily Carter was 34. To anyone watching from the outside, she looked ordinary, soft-spoken, simply dressed, the kind of woman people underestimated without meaning to. She lived quietly. She worked modestly. She smiled politely. And she had learned, very early in life, how to make herself smaller on purpose. That had been a choice. Years ago, before her life narrowed into this quiet kitchen and this marriage, Emily had sat at polished tables with board binders stacked in front of her. She had listened to bankers and attorneys speak in careful language. She had signed documents that carried more weight than most people ever touched. Not because she chased power, but because it was handed to her the day her father died. He had been careful, precise. He taught her how ownership worked, how leverage hid in paperwork, how silence could be stronger than authority. When he passed unexpectedly, Emily inherited more than wealth. She inherited responsibility, influence, and a truth most people didn't learn until it was too late. That truth had come to her the night before the funeral. In a quiet office, when her father's attorney opened a sealed letter and read his final instruction aloud. If they know who you are, he told her gently, they'll never show you who they are. That sentence followed her everywhere. It shaped her choices. It became the reason she stepped back from a world that never loved without calculation. So when Emily met Daniel Carter, she didn't tell him everything. Daniel was 36, ambitious, charming in a restless way. He talked about success as if it were something always one step ahead of him. He worried about money openly, almost defensively. He wanted more than he had, but not enough to question where it came from when relief arrived. Emily liked that he didn't ask too many questions. She dressed simply on their first dates, paid for small things quietly. When Daniel struggled, missed opportunities, financial stress, moments of frustration, Emily helped in ways that didn't bruise his pride. Not flashy, not obvious, just steady. She never reminded him, never counted favors, never corrected the assumptions he made about her background. She wanted him to choose her freely. When they married, she carried that choice into their life together. She believed love didn't need witnesses. That devotion didn't need applause. She believed the best relationships were built in private moments no one else ever saw. Daniel said he liked that about her. In the early years, he would squeeze her hand when things went wrong and say, "We'll figure it out." Emily always believed him. She always thought patience would be enough. Now, standing alone in the kitchen, she heard his footsteps behind her. Daniel leaned against the doorway, loosening his tie. He looked tired but excited. There was a restless energy in him that Emily had learned to recognize. "My family called," he said casually. Emily turned, offering him a soft smile. "Is everything okay?" Yeah, it's fine." He hesitated, then added, "They're hosting a big Christmas party this year. Really big. Everyone's coming." Something flickered in Emily's chest. Not fear, not excitement, just awareness. "That sounds nice," she said. Daniel rubbed the back of his neck, avoiding her eyes. "It's kind of important to them. You know how they are." She nodded. She did know. He hesitated again, then laughed lightly, as if trying to soften what came next. "Just don't talk about money, okay? They're sensitive about that stuff." The words landed quietly, but they landed. Emily didn't argue. She didn't question him. She didn't remind him of anything she had done, or hidden, or sacrificed. She simply smiled again. "Of course," she said. Daniel relaxed instantly, as if a problem had been solved. He leaned in, kissed her cheek, and walked away, already distracted by something on his phone. Emily stayed where she was. When the house fell quiet again, she crossed the room and opened a small safe hidden behind a cabinet panel Daniel had never noticed because he had never looked. Inside was a thin, locked folder, unassuming, ordinary to anyone else. But Emily knew what it was. Personal trust summaries, marriage documents, a sealed envelope labeled, "If needed." She didn't open it. She closed the safe gently, as if the papers inside were sleeping. Emily returned to the counter, her eyes drifting back to the phone. The missed call from Brooks Legal still sat there, unanswered. She knew she couldn't keep pretending forever. She just didn't know yet that Christmas would decide everything. And somewhere beyond that invitation, something was already waiting to be exposed. The laugh came first, sharp, public, unnecessary. Emily felt it before she understood it, the sound cutting across the dinner table, followed by a pause that stretched just long enough for discomfort to settle. She lifted her eyes slowly, already knowing who it came from. Margaret Carter was smiling. Margaret was Daniel's mother, early 60s, perfect posture, carefully styled hair that never moved out of place. She spoke with the confidence of someone who had never been questioned in her own home. Margaret liked control, and she liked reminding people who belonged where. "Well," Margaret said lightly, waving a hand as if brushing away a trivial thought. Emily wouldn't understand these things anyway. The table chuckled politely. Emily sat still. This was how it usually started. The room was full that night, family, friends, longtime neighbors, people who had known Daniel since childhood. Plates clinked, glasses lifted, conversations overlapped. It looked warm, familiar, safe, but it never was. Emily had learned the pattern early. Margaret corrected the way she pronounced words, the way she held her fork, the way she described her work, always with a smile. Always disguised as concern, Lydia Carter, Daniel's younger sister, sat across from her, scrolling on her phone while half listening, late 20s. Loud where Margaret was subtle, she liked jokes that landed a little too hard. "So what do you actually do again?" Lydia asked suddenly, not looking up. "It's kind of small, right?" Emily opened her mouth to answer. But Robert Carter spoke first. Robert was Daniel's father, quiet, observant. He leaned back in his chair, fingers folded over his stomach, eyes fixed not on Emily, but on Daniel. "So," Robert said, nodding toward his son, "how's work going? Any promotions coming?" Daniel straightened immediately. "Yeah, actually, there might be something soon." Robert smiled, a small, satisfied smirk, as if the answer belonged to him. No one asked Emily anything else. She waited. She always waited, Daniel noticed. Emily knew he did. She saw the flicker of awareness cross his face each time a comment landed wrong. Each time his mother spoke over her. Each time Lydia laughed. But Daniel never stopped it. Instead, he shifted the conversation, asked about sports, complimented the food, changed the subject just enough for the moment to pass without confrontation. Emily told herself that was love, trying to keep peace. She told herself patience would teach them. Between bites of food, Margaret leaned closer to a family friend and said loudly, "Daniel's always been the ambitious one. We're so proud of how far he's come." Emily smiled politely, her hands folded in her lap. She remembered quiet nights when Daniel came home defeated, worried about money, unsure of himself. She remembered covering small bills, encouraging him when he doubted his worth. None of that existed here. At this table, Daniel stood alone. Later, as dessert was served, Lydia leaned toward another guest and whispered just loudly enough, "She's lucky Daniel married her." Emily heard it. She pretended not to. That was her mistake. Or at least, that's what she would later realize. When the evening ended, Emily helped clear plates without being asked. She thanked Margaret for dinner. She hugged people who barely noticed her presence. In the car ride home, Daniel talked about how exhausting his family could be. "They mean well," he said. "You know how they are." Emily nodded, staring out the window. She did know. Weeks passed, then months. The comments never stopped, they just shifted forms, a raised eyebrow, a half smile, a joke that landed a second too late to challenge. And then came the call she wasn't meant to hear. Margaret had dropped by unannounced like she always did, and taken over the living room as if it belonged to her. Margaret stood in the living room one afternoon with speakerphone on, her voice loud and animated because Margaret never spoke as if privacy mattered. "We're hosting Christmas this year," she announced proudly. "A real one. Everyone important will be there." Emily folded laundry down the hall, half hidden behind the doorway, listening without moving. Margaret continued, "It's time we do something proper. You know, to remind people where we stand." Lydia laughed in the background. "This Christmas is going to put her in her place." The words slipped out casually. Too casually. Emily's hands froze mid-fold. She didn't look up. She didn't react. She didn't let anyone see the moment land. But her fingers tightened around her wedding ring until it pressed painfully into her skin. She finished folding the shirt with careful precision. Because now, she understood something she had refused to see before. This wasn't misunderstanding. It was intention. And Christmas wasn't going to be a celebration. It was going to be a stage. After that day, Daniel changed in smaller ways that were harder to name. Later nights, shorter answers, a phone that never faced up anymore. Emily didn't accuse. She just watched. And then, one night, the watching finally paid off. The phone lit up in the dark like a quiet accusation. Emily froze at the edge of the bed, breath caught halfway between inhale and exhale. The room was still, too still. The soft sound of water running from the bathroom told her Daniel was in the shower, close enough to hear, far enough not to see. The screen glowed once. Then again, Emily hadn't touched Daniel's phone. She didn't need to. A message preview was already reflected mirrored on the shared tablet on her nightstand, the one Daniel had connected months ago for convenience and then forgot existed. The preview flashed, clean and sharp against the black. "I hate pretending I don't matter." No name, no photo, just the words. Emily stared at them longer than she should have. Her first instinct wasn't anger. It wasn't fear. It was something colder. Awareness. The kind that settles slowly, like a weight shifting into place. She didn't open the message. She didn't tap the thread. She didn't scroll. Emily had learned long ago that rushed conclusions were often wrong. Patterns, however, never lied. Over the past few weeks, Daniel had been changing, but not in ways dramatic enough to accuse. He stayed late more often. He laughed at messages he didn't explain. His phone was always face down now, as if by habit. When Emily asked simple questions, his answers came sharper than before. "Why are you checking on me? I told you I'd be late. Can we not do this tonight?" The words themselves weren't proof, but the tone was new. She listened. She watched. Later that week, Daniel mentioned someone new at work. "We've got a consultant helping on a few projects," he said casually while pouring a drink. "Smart, efficient, kind of a lifesaver, actually." Emily nodded. "That's good." He smiled too quickly. "Yeah." She said nothing more. A few nights later, while Daniel slept, Emily noticed something else. That same thread preview popping up late, too late for work, and always with the same emotional bite. Emily began to connect the quiet dots. She noticed how Daniel stepped into other rooms to answer calls, how he tilted the phone away from her without realizing he was doing it. Still, she said nothing. She waited. The night the message appeared again, everything slowed. Daniel was in the shower once more. Steam filled the bathroom. The mirror fogged over. Emily folded laundry at the foot of the bed, moving calmly, rhythmically. The shared tablet lit up. I hate pretending I don't matter. Same tone, same demand, different night. Emily lifted the tablet. Her hands were steady. She took a single screenshot, only the preview, only what appeared without opening anything. Then she locked the screen and placed it back exactly where it had been. She didn't save it in her camera roll. She forwarded it to her own secure folder, then deleted the forward from the tablet's visible history. By the time Daniel came out of the shower, wrapped in a towel and relaxed, everything looked exactly the same. "You okay?" he asked casually. "Yes," Emily said, and meant it in a way he would never understand. That night, as Daniel slept beside her, Emily lay awake, staring at the ceiling. She didn't cry. She didn't shake. She didn't imagine screaming matches. She remembered her father's voice again, soft and steady. Watch first, understand second, act last. She didn't know who the woman was yet. She didn't know how long it had been going on. But she knew one thing with absolute certainty. Someone believed they mattered more than Emily did, and Daniel was letting them believe it. The next morning, Daniel grabbed his phone and rushed out the door. He kissed Emily's forehead distractedly and said, "Big day today." Emily watched him leave, her expression unreadable. She walked to the home safe and opened it just long enough to slide in a small note. One line, one date. Evidence doesn't rush, she thought. It waits. And as she closed the safe, her phone vibrated again, this time from a number she didn't recognize. Emily didn't answer, but she knew the next step was no longer about observation, it was about preparation. The phone rang sharply, slicing through the quiet of the living room. Emily flinched before she could stop herself. Daniel was in the next room, half focused on his laptop, but Emily already knew who it was. The ringing had a rhythm she recognized, impatient, demanding, confident it would be answered. She picked up on the third ring. "Emily." Margaret's voice came through immediately, crisp and controlled. "I'm calling to confirm Christmas." Margaret never wasted words, and she never asked questions she didn't already think she knew the answer to. "Yes," Emily said calmly. "What would you like to confirm?" Margaret didn't pause. "We're doing gifts this year, real gifts. Everyone is bringing something appropriate." There was movement on the other end, dishes clinking, voices in the background. Emily could hear Lydia laughing somewhere nearby. "It's important," Margaret continued, lowering her voice just enough to sound serious. "Everyone important will be there." Emily pictured it instantly. The room, the eyes, the measuring looks. She had survived it in smaller doses. This time, it would be larger. Public. "That sounds lovely," Emily replied politely. Margaret made a small approving sound. "Good. We want things done properly this year." And Emily, a slight pause, like a smile you couldn't see. "Try to make an effort." Emily's voice didn't change. "Of course." She thanked Margaret, wished her a good evening, and ended the call. The silence afterward felt heavier than before. Daniel walked in almost immediately, as if he had been waiting. "That was my mom, right?" he asked. "Yes," Emily said. He sighed, rubbing his face. "She's been stressing about this party for weeks." Emily studied him quietly. His shoulders were tense, his eyes avoided hers. He hesitated, then smiled in a way meant to feel light. "Just don't embarrass me, okay?" The words hung in the air. Emily felt them land not sharply but deeply. She searched his face for a joke, a correction, any sign he would take it back. He didn't. "I won't," she said gently. Daniel relaxed instantly, as if that single sentence had lifted something from him. He leaned forward and kissed her cheek. "I know, you're great." He returned to his laptop, already moving on. Emily stayed where she was. In that moment, something shifted inside her, not anger, not sadness, understanding. He was more afraid of his family's judgment than of losing her respect. That realization hurt more than anything Margaret had ever said. Later that evening, Emily stood alone in a quiet store aisle, holding two gifts in her hands. One was expensive, elegant, impossible to ignore, the kind of gift that would change the temperature of a room. The other was simple, thoughtful, easy to dismiss. The kind of gift people mocked when they wanted permission to mock you. She stared at them for a long time. Then she chose the simple one. At home, she placed it carefully into a gift bag and set it by the door. In her bedroom, she opened her purse and touched the edge of a manila envelope tucked inside. Her fingers paused. For a moment, she considered taking it out. She didn't. She slid it deeper and zipped the bag closed. Not yet, she whispered to herself. That night, as Daniel slept, Emily sat at the edge of the bed, turning her wedding ring slowly around her finger. She thought about every dinner she had smiled through, every moment she had waited for anyone to speak up. Then her phone vibrated softly. She didn't ignore it. A voicemail, calm and professional. "Mrs. Carter, this is Brooks Legal. We need to speak. Your father's trust requires the year-end authorization you postponed. The holding structure can't remain in limbo much longer." Emily closed her eyes. When the message ended, she sat very still. Then she spoke quietly, with certainty. "After Christmas." She placed the phone down, turned off the light, and lay beside Daniel, her face unreadable in the dark. Outside, the calendar moved closer to December, and somewhere between gift bags and polite smiles, the line had been crossed. Christmas was no longer a date. It was a deadline. The front door opened, and the noise hit Emily all at once. Laughter, music, voices overlapping sharp and bright. The house was full, too full. Lights reflected off polished surfaces, glasses clinked, people hugged and talked loudly, as if being heard mattered more than being kind. Emily stepped inside and felt invisible immediately. Not because of what she wore. Her dress was simple, elegant, chosen carefully. She felt invisible because people looked past her through her like she was part of the background furniture. A wife-shaped space, nothing more. Daniel walked ahead of her, already smiling, already in his element. He shook hands, accepted compliments, laughed easily. Margaret and Robert stood near the center of the room, like hosts at a performance, smiling for guests, tracking status, collecting admiration. Margaret noticed Emily last. She smiled, the kind of smile that never reached her eyes. "Emily," she said, lightly touching her arm, "you made it," as if there had been doubt. Robert nodded once in acknowledgement, then turned back to a man asking Daniel questions about work. As usual, Robert spoke to his son, not his daughter-in-law, about money, projects, and future plans. Emily stood beside Daniel, listening quietly. Margaret had insisted Daniel bring someone impressive from work, proof he was climbing, proof the family still mattered in the rooms that counted. Daniel had agreed too quickly, desperate for approval, and whoever the woman was, she had arrived with the confidence of someone who expected to be welcomed. And then Emily felt it before she fully saw it. The woman standing just a little too close. She laughed at Daniel's jokes before he finished them. She nodded as if she already knew the stories. She wore confidence, easily professional, polished, familiar in a way that didn't match co-worker. Daniel's hand lifted automatically, guiding the woman forward with practiced ease. "Oh," he said brightly, like this was normal. "You two haven't met. Emily, this is Claire Monroe. She's the consultant I told you about. Claire, this is my wife." There it was, the name, the role, the lie dressed as introduction. Emily's stomach tightened. Claire's eyes swept over Emily, calm and assessing. Then she smiled. Not warmly, not cruelly, knowingly. "You must be so proud," Claire said softly, just loud enough for Emily to hear. Supporting him from the sidelines. The words were gentle. The meaning was not. In that moment, Emily understood something clearly for the first time. Claire knew exactly who Emily was supposed to be, or rather who Claire believed Emily was. Emily met her gaze without blinking. "I am," she said simply. Claire's smile widened, satisfied like a person who thought she'd already won. The evening moved on, but the tension stayed. When it was time for gifts, Lydia clapped her hands dramatically. "Let's do this part," she announced. "This should be fun." Emily handed over her gift bag quietly. Lydia lifted it, raised an eyebrow, and laughed before opening it. "Oh, this should be interesting." A few people chuckled. Lydia pulled out the gift, thoughtful, modest, carefully chosen. She turned it over, pretending to inspect it like a joke. "Well," she said loudly, "it's cute." The laughter was sharper this time. Margaret stepped in smoothly. "It's sweet of you, Emily. Some women are just better at fitting in." A guest laughed too loudly. Emily glanced at Daniel. He looked uncomfortable. But he didn't speak. Margaret continued, warming to the moment. "Of course, not everyone grows up with the same expectations. Some people marry into opportunities they never imagined. She smiled, lifting her glass. The room leaned in. Emily felt something settle inside her, heavy, cold, clear. This wasn't ignorance. This wasn't misunderstanding. This was permission. Daniel had given it to them every time he stayed quiet, every time he changed the subject, every time he chose peace over truth. Emily's fingers brushed her ring. She felt the edge press into her skin. She looked at Daniel again. He smiled at her then. A small, embarrassed smile, like he was asking her to endure a little longer. Margaret raised her glass higher. "Let's hear it for Emily," she announced loudly, her voice cutting through the music. "Proof that anyone can marry into this family." The room laughed. Not everyone, but enough. Emily stood very still. She looked at Daniel. He didn't stop it. He didn't correct it. He smiled. And in that smile, something inside Emily finally broke free. She felt calm, dangerously calm. As the laughter faded and the music resumed, Emily lowered her eyes, not in shame, but in decision. Because this was no longer a misunderstanding to survive. It was a moment to remember, and moments like this always come with consequences. The laughter didn't stop. It rolled on louder now, fueled by wine and confidence, like the room had decided Emily Carter was no longer a person, but a performance. Margaret kept her glass raised, enjoying the attention. Her voice grew warmer, looser, more careless with every word. "We're just so grateful," she said, smiling broadly, "that Daniel found someone who appreciates what she's been given. Not everyone gets lucky like that." A few guests nodded. Someone laughed. Emily stood near the edge of the room, posture straight, hands relaxed at her sides. She felt strangely distant, as if she were watching her own life happen from across the room. Margaret continued. "Some people spend their whole lives wanting more. Emily understands gratitude." Lydia leaned forward eagerly, feeding off the moment. "Honestly," she added with a laugh, "she should thank us for upgrading her life." This time, the laughter was sharper, louder. A man near the fireplace, someone important, judging by how people angled their bodies toward him, tilted his head and asked, almost casually, "So, Emily, what do you do for work?" For a fraction of a second, the room paused. Emily opened her mouth. Daniel spoke first. "She doesn't really have a career," he said quickly, with an awkward laugh. "She does little things, helps out. Nothing major." The word little didn't need explaining. Emily felt it then, not pain, not shock, but separation. A clean, quiet break inside her chest. She looked at Daniel. He wouldn't meet her eyes. And Claire, standing close enough to Daniel that her perfume sat in his space, stepped forward smoothly, sensing an opening the way predators sense weakness. She placed a light hand on Daniel's arm and turned to Emily with a soft, sympathetic smile. "Some women are just," Claire said gently, like she was offering kindness, "placeholders." The silence that followed was sudden and heavy. Then came nervous laughter, a cough, someone shifting uncomfortably, trying to pretend this wasn't cruel. Emily felt every eye turned toward her. She didn't move. She didn't blink. For the first time all night, she spoke. "Is that what I am?" she asked calmly. Her voice didn't rise. It didn't tremble. It cut through the noise cleanly. Daniel stared at the floor. Margaret frowned, annoyed by the interruption. Lydia rolled her eyes, like Emily had committed the sin of making things uncomfortable. No one answered. Emily waited anyway. This was the exact second everything changed. Inside her mind, her father's voice returned steady, unshaken by time. "Never respond when they think you're powerless. Respond when they know." They thought she was powerless. Emily picked up her wine glass, feeling its cool weight in her hand. For a moment it looked like she might drink, like she might swallow it down like she always had. Instead, she set it down on the table, untouched. "I think I should leave," she said softly. "I have something to take care of." The room froze. Margaret blinked, surprised. "Oh well." Daniel looked up then, confused, like he'd forgotten Emily was capable of movement without permission. "Emily," he started. She didn't stop. No one followed her. No one apologized. No one called her back. They watched her go because they believed this was the end of it. Daniel stood frozen for a breath, eyes following her to the door. Then he forced a laugh too loud, too quick, and turned back to the room like a man trying to glue his pride together. "She's just overwhelmed," he said, smiling. And the room accepted the lie because it was convenient. Emily walked through the front door and into the night. The laughter behind her became muffled as the door closed. She stood still for a moment, breathing in cold air, grounding herself. Her phone vibrated in her coat pocket. Brooks' legal private client. "This time," she answered. "Yes," she said quietly. A pause. "Mrs. Carter," the voice said, professional and calm. "Are you ready to authorize the filings we discussed?" Emily looked back at the house one last time, the lights, the music, the people who thought they had won. "Yes," she replied. She hung up, stepped into her car, and drove away. Behind her, the party continued. Ahead of her, something irreversible had already begun, and the next time they saw her, she would not be leaving quietly. Emily didn't cry. She didn't scream. She didn't pull over. She drove. The road was dark and empty, nothing like the noise she'd left behind. Her hands stayed steady on the wheel. Her breathing stayed even. Anyone watching would have thought she was calm. She wasn't calm. She was finished. Emily turned into a private parking garage attached to a quiet office building Daniel had never visited because it wasn't hers in the way he understood. It belonged to a holding company her father had built long before Daniel existed in her life. The name on the building directory was forgettable on purpose, one of those bland corporate shells people walk past every day without thinking twice. The security gate recognized her plate and lifted. Upstairs, the elevator required a key card. Emily swiped once. The doors opened without sound. Her office lights came on automatically, clean, minimal, controlled. Emily crossed to a wall panel, opened it, and revealed a safe. Not dramatic, not cinematic, just real. She entered a code. The safe unlocked with a quiet click. Inside were the pieces of her life she'd kept separate by design. Trust summaries and separate property documentation. A signed prenuptial agreement Daniel had never read carefully enough to understand. A sealed contingency folder her father's attorneys had prepared years ago, and a small external drive labeled in her father's handwriting, "If you need to protect yourself." Emily laid everything out on the desk, one piece at a time. Then came what she'd collected without drama. Screenshots of message previews, dates, times. And the part that made this bigger than heartbreak wasn't a guess, it was traceable. Maya had already been working quietly for weeks, activated the moment Emily forwarded that first screenshot. And Daniel had been careless in the way insecure men often are. Confirmations synced to shared devices, receipts sitting in email, reimbursements saved under file names that assumed no one would ever look, expense records, not assumptions, not rumors, numbers, hotel charges routed through business reimbursement, client dinners on nights Daniel claimed he was working late, a company card used in ways compliance teams were trained to notice because patterns always repeated. A knock came at the door. "Come in," Emily said. A man entered first. David Brooks. He was her attorney trust counsel first, litigation second, early 40s, calm, precise. The kind of man who didn't raise his voice because he didn't need to. Behind him came Maya Lewis, a private investigator with sharp eyes and no wasted movement. They sat without small talk. Emily slid the file across the desk. "This is everything," she said. David Brooks read quietly, page after page. No dramatic reactions, just tightening focus. Maya opened her own folder and added details with professional certainty. "He didn't just have an affair," Maya said. "He got sloppy. He used work cover stories, work money, work access. And Claire wasn't a stranger. She was brought into the same circles as your in-laws." Emily's jaw tightened once. David looked up. "Emily," he said carefully, "this isn't just divorce. This is exposure." Emily didn't flinch. "I know." David tapped the prenuptial agreement lightly. "Your separate assets are protected. Your father designed it that way. The marital assets are another process, but the evidence of financial misconduct gives us leverage," Maya added. "And the company can't ignore this. If Daniel used corporate funds improperly, it becomes a compliance issue. That forces action." Emily exhaled once. "Then we don't threaten," she said calmly. "We document." David nodded. He placed two sets of papers in front of her. A divorce petition and request for temporary orders. A formal complaint packet prepared for the company's compliance office and board counsel, fax only. Evidence attached. Emily picked up the pen. Her hand didn't shake. As she signed, something shifted, not loudly, Not dramatically, but permanently. David gathered the pages. We file tonight. Service happens fast. Maya stood. And I'll keep verifying. No gaps. Emily watched them move with practiced efficiency. This wasn't revenge. This was protection. And by the time Daniel realized what she had set in motion, it would already be too late. The courtroom doors opened, and Daniel Carter walked in like a man who thought he still had control. His suit was sharp, his posture confident. He nodded at familiar faces, family, friends, business contacts, people who believed this was a marriage issue that would settle privately like everything else. Margaret sat stiffly in the front row, lips pressed thin. Robert sat beside her, arms crossed. Lydia leaned back with forced boredom, scrolling like she couldn't be embarrassed. Daniel wasn't worried. Not yet. Then he saw Emily. She was already seated at the front, calm, composed, dressed simply. Beside her sat David Brooks, legal pad open, files organized, expression unreadable. Daniel's steps slowed. His confidence flickered. Why is she sitting like that? He thought. Like she belongs here. The judge entered. Everyone stood. When the hearing began, Daniel still believed he could explain. Still believed his voice carried weight. David Brooks stood first. For context, he said evenly, Mrs. Carter is the trustee and sole beneficiary of the holding structure established by her late father. Her separate estate is documented, protected, and fully traceable. He didn't insult Daniel. He didn't perform. He presented facts, screenshots and timelines establishing the affair, not emotional language documentation, then financial records, expense reports, reimbursements that didn't match business activity, a paper trail that didn't care about charm. The courtroom murmured. Daniel's face tightened. The judge listened without expression, then turned to Daniel with a kind of calm that made panic worse. Mr. Carter, the judge said, temporary orders exist for a reason. They prevent people from hiding assets and escalating conflict. Based on what I'm seeing, I'm granting the requested temporary restrictions and ordering full financial disclosure. Daniel opened his mouth. Margaret shifted forward like she was about to speak. Ma'am, the judge said without looking at her. Do not interrupt. Margaret froze. David Brooks continued, voice even. And for the court's awareness, Mr. Carter's employer has been notified of allegations involving misuse of corporate funds. We are not asking this court to decide employment outcomes. We are documenting relevant financial conduct. Daniel's head snapped up. What? He said, too loud. Emily didn't react. Daniel's phone vibrated once, then again. He glanced down, then froze. Subject line, administrative leave effective immediately. His attorney looked at the screen, went pale in the quiet way professionals do, and slid a printed copy across the table without a word. Daniel stared at it like it was written in another language. Lydia stopped scrolling. Robert's mouth tightened. Margaret's face drained. Daniel's voice cracked for the first time. This is insane. The judge's gaze sharpened. Mr. Carter, control yourself. Daniel looked at Emily, then really looked. And in that second, the dinners replayed in his mind. The quiet support, the way money problems had softened without explanation, the way she never argued about how things got paid. Emily wasn't beside him. She had been holding him up. The judge spoke again, calm as a blade. The court's orders are effective immediately. Violation of these temporary orders will have consequences. And then Daniel heard the sound that didn't belong in his fantasy of control. Footsteps. A uniformed deputy stepped closer, not to make a scene, but to make sure the court's space stayed controlled. And then a man in plain clothes appeared at the end of the aisle, quiet, professional, holding a packet like it weighed nothing, a process server. Daniel Carter? He asked. Daniel's throat went dry. Yes? You've been served, the man said evenly, extending the documents. This is the filed petition and temporary orders. The room shifted. Whispers started. Daniel looked around like someone waiting for the world to correct itself. It didn't. Security didn't move for Emily. They moved for him. And in that moment, Daniel understood something too late. This wasn't a fight he could talk his way out of. This was a life he had already lost. Daniel broke the moment the courtroom doors closed behind them. The sound echoed heavy wood shutting, and it was like something inside him collapsed with it. Emily, wait! His voice was too loud, too desperate. People in the hallway turned their heads, pretended not to stare, failed. Emily kept walking. Her heels moved steadily across the marble. Her back stayed straight. Her face stayed calm. She looked nothing like the woman who had stood quietly at the edge of a Christmas party weeks earlier. Daniel rushed forward and grabbed her arm. It happened fast. A deputy stepped between them immediately. Another caught Daniel's wrist and forced his hand away with practiced ease. "Sir," the deputy said firmly. "Step back." Daniel stumbled, barely steady. Margaret stood behind them, frozen. Her mouth opened like she wanted to command the hallway into obedience. No sound came. No one was listening to her. "Please," Daniel said, voice cracking. "Emily, please just listen to me." Emily stopped. The hallway went quiet. She turned slowly. This was the first time she really looked at him since the judge spoke. Daniel's suit was wrinkled now, his eyes wet, his confidence gone so completely it looked ridiculous that it had ever existed. "I was insecure," he said quickly, words tumbling over each other. "You know that. My family, they've always been like this. They pressured me. I just wanted to keep the peace." Emily didn't speak. "I never meant for it to go that far," Daniel rushed on. "I didn't think it would turn into this. I swear." Margaret found her voice, weak and thin. "Emily, families make mistakes. We can talk about this." Emily didn't look at her. She looked only at Daniel. When she finally spoke, her voice was steady, quiet enough to be controlled, clear enough that everyone nearby heard. "You didn't humiliate me because you were weak," she said. "You humiliated me because you thought I was." Daniel's face collapsed. Emily reached into her bag and removed a single envelope. Not dramatic, not theatrical, official. She pressed it gently against his chest. "What's that?" he whispered. "Your copies," Emily said. "The petition, the temporary orders, the financial disclosures you're required to provide, and the notice from your employer." Daniel's hands shook as he opened it. He didn't need to read every line to understand what it meant. This wasn't a fight, it was a process, and it was already moving without him. "No," he whispered. "Emily, please." He sagged, knees weakening like his body couldn't hold the truth. The deputy's grip tightened. "Sir," the deputy said firmly, "step back, now. You are not to touch her." Daniel looked at Emily one last time, begging. Broken, small, Emily didn't answer. She didn't comfort him. She didn't explain again. She didn't need to. She turned away and walked past him. She didn't slow down. She didn't look back. Behind her, Daniel was escorted down the hallway, his protests fading into the sterile quiet of a building built for consequences. Margaret stood in place, watching everything she thought she controlled collapse without a single person stepping in to save her. Emily pushed through the exit doors and stepped outside. The air felt different out there, lighter. Her phone buzzed once. A message from David Brooks. Filed. Served. Orders granted. We move next. Emily slipped the phone back into her bag and kept walking, steps unhurried, expression unreadable. This chapter was closed. But the consequences were still finishing their work. Months later, the pen met paper with a quiet, final scrape. Emily's signature dried beneath the last line, sealing decisions that couldn't be undone and no longer needed to be justified. The room was quiet except for the soft hum of the building, steady, controlled, secure. Across the desk, folders were stacked neatly. Not chaos, not revenge. Just outcomes. Emily didn't rush. She read every page. She always did. This was her office, now fully hers, without apology. Bright lines, minimal design. No personal photos, no reminders of a life that had required her to shrink. David Brooks sat across from her, calm as ever. He slid the final document forward. "That's the last authorization," he said. "Corporate operations are stabilized. No loose ends." Emily nodded and signed. Maya Lewis stood near the window, arms crossed, eyes sharp. Her work was done too. The investigation had closed quietly, but completely, no rumors left unverified, no evidence left unsecured. "They're still trying to reach you," Maya said. "The family. Not Daniel, the others." Emily didn't look up. "They won't." Maya nodded once, understanding. When they left, the door closed softly behind them. No echo, no drama. In the months since the courtroom, Daniel's family had fractured under the weight of truth they could no longer control. Margaret withdrew from public events she once hosted like a throne room. Robert stopped returning calls from the same people he used to impress. Lydia disappeared from the social spaces that once celebrated her voice. Claire Monroe vanished the moment consequences became real, because people like that were only brave when they thought the cost would land on someone else. And Daniel? His name didn't open doors anymore. It closed them. Emily stood alone in the center of the office, breathing in the quiet. She crossed the room and opened the wall panel where the safe was hidden. This time, there was no hesitation. The safe was empty. No secrets, no emergency folder, no silence waiting to be used. She closed it and turned the lock with a soft click. Emily rested her hand against the safe door for a moment. Memories flickering, family dinners she endured, words she swallowed, patience she mistook for love. She had once believed staying quiet would protect what mattered. She had been wrong. She walked to the window and looked out, not searching for anything, just seeing clearly. Her reflection in the glass looked different now, not harder, just whole. In her mind, her father's voice returned not as warning, but reassurance. "You don't owe anyone your silence." Emily smiled faintly. She turned off the lights, picked up her coat, and walked out without looking back. Outside, the evening was calm, ordinary, exactly how she liked it. As she stepped forward, she thought not with anger, not with regret, but with clarity. They thought humiliation would make me small, but all it did was remind me who I was before I chose silence. She kept walking, because the truth was simple: never mistake kindness for permission. And somewhere behind her, a door closed quietly for good. I hope you enjoyed watching this story as much as I enjoyed creating it. Like, share, and comment on the lessons you've learned. Let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. I'll see you in my next video.